Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to the Crescendo room at the Throckmorton Theater. Please welcome the next President of the United States, Mr. Mort Sahl.
Let me explain all the accoutrements. The walkers outside to make sure I don't fall and have, what do they use, Kathleen? When you fall around, what's that stuff they use?
Oh, life alert.
That tubing
Oh.
they use for fall. And I'm trying to save the other eye. So I'm like a regular customer of Green Bray these days. And, but it's okay. It'll all be okay. And by the way, Nathan, I heard Bill Evans playing the Jerome Kern thing that Kenton recorded. And they tried to put it out with Maynard Ferguson, and the Kern family sued. They said he had distorted the song. So it's amazing how far people go. Ferguson, made a whole career out of playing Rocky. And when the Academy Awards came out, Rocky won Best Picture. And Sidney Lumet, who had directed Network, said, I don't mind losing, but there's something like Rocky, a very good sport, obviously. Rocky cost $920,000 to make and took in $375 million. So there's something to be said to the fact that you want to feel better about this struggle called living. If a picture makes you feel better. Last week we talked about movies a lot on the show, and probably not enough, because they really changed what our expectation was. I mean, if you see a movie like that movie about Admiral Halsey with James Cagney, it's really only Robert Montgomery directing Cagney to play the Admiral. I mean, those stories are wild. The defeat of the Japanese was largely engineered by Admiral Nimitz, East Bay, Jewish admiral. And he said, on a gut hunch, he said, we have to confront them at Wake. He said, they're going to go to Midway. And he caught the entire Japanese Navy there. These guys are, there's something else. By the way, I flew off a carrier. I didn't tell you that, Kathleen. I flew off a carrier with Paul Newman. Got a free ride in there, and if that doesn't scare you to death. And in fact, I'll take this a little farther. George Roy Hill, who directed Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, was a major in the Marine Corps. He shot down 7 Korean MiGs. So he became a flight instructor down in Pensacola. And one of the standard things they would do is cut the engine on and off. They have master control, just to scare the cadets. So he cuts it out and he says, I guess we ran out of gas. And the kid turned green in the back, and he ejected. So he picked them up in the swamp, and they had a court martial on the hill. And he said, what happened? He said, it looked like the engine was failing, and Major Hill said, "Save your ass." Actually, what he said was, "I'm saving gas." So the guy ejected and wound up in the swamp. Anyway, it doesn't scare you to death flying off a carrier. That'll do it. Thank you. And they invited Newman, and he took me. I was in the Air Force myself. Please hold your applause. And the best picture ever about the Air Force is probably 12 o'clock high. Wonderful. The give and take between the men. Totally credible. You know? What's wrong with the 918? The general said. And Gregory Peck said. The commander, it's always the commander, getting too involved with the men. He said, "Well, it's pretty funny coming from you. You're supposed to be his friend." He said, "I didn't ask you to ask me." It's perfect. It's the way men hide their feelings. And nowadays, of course, the way the world is going, soon women will be hiding their feelings. I guess you're all probably taken up with the idea that Joseph Biden is back. A few notes about Joseph Biden. I'll explain this so. Biden, you know, was in the lead on getting Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court, who has never said anything, the black justice, who harassed the girl, Anita Hill, remember? And she didn't get justice from Biden or his friends in the Senate. And Biden also, Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill. Oh, remember when he recommended Obama? He said, "He's good, he's young, he's clean." Remember that? Well, nobody ever said, "What do you mean he's clean?" And you notice that Obama didn't endorse him today. Because he would be 78 when he's inaugurated. He would be almost as old as Bernie Sanders. So, you know, we had somebody in the audience here who said to me, "I know he doesn't look the part, but what about Sanders?" So I said, "What does that mean? He's Jewish? He doesn't look the part." That's Mill Valley talk for somebody being Jewish. You know about Mill Valley talk? That's all we talk down at the Coyote Coffee House. We talk Mill Valley talk. People walk out and they say, "Another day in paradise." And then I say to them, "Just think what God could do if he had money." Of where we are here. Where are we? Well, one step removed from paradise for some people. Anyway, let me tell you about our setup tonight. The lady with the phones and the cameras is Kathleen Hahn, who produces the show and streams it through Periscope and Facebook. Then she sets up all the callers, and I answer them live. And we figured the way Facebook is going, and Netflix, and streaming, we would be getting the times. So that's how this started. It's been a long time. Been a few years now. And in the beginning, Chris was with us here, doing this, and he went, Chris Britt, and he flew all the way to Hawaii to see Ram Dass. He went to Maui to see Ram Dass. You know about the American Clerics? There used to be a cartoon about that. The guy's on a silent mountain in India, and people are lined up to get his wisdom. What is the meaning of life, Ram Dass? Why are we here, Ram Dass? And then a lady comes up to him, and he says, "What's your question?" The lady says, when are you coming home, Sheldon? So, one thing reminds me of another. So, anyway, so we have some writers that keep calling in. Kathleen tells me that our friend in Bethesda is very faithful to us every week. And I lived in Bethesda. I was on the radio for NBC for a year in Washington. And in fact, my neighbor was Sergeant Shriver, Maria Shriver's old man. The nicest guy in the county, nicest. I'll have more to say about that later. Kathleen, anybody on there?
Yes, Mort. Your friend from Bethesda says that Joe Biden wants to save America from Trump. Who will save America from Joe Biden?
Very good. That's exactly the question that should be posed. You got to remember what Biden said to Anita Hill when she said sexually harassed by Clarence. I'll tell you another thing about Joe Biden. The chief arms inspector went into Iraq and he said there are no weapons of mass destruction. And Senator Biden said, I'd say it's a little above your pay grade to decide that. That's the way he treated a man who was a patriot, who was risking his life running around Iraq during that whole fake thing. Nobody's talked about that at all. I saw the movie this week on Movies on Demand about Cheney with Christian Bale, right? Mm-hmm. As Cheney. He's very good, but the picture isn't any good. It's made by the new filmmakers who missed the point. Like, if when the planes went out, when the buildings came down, why does Building 7 shake symmetrically, but it doesn't fall in the master show? That's a fake story. And the only book about 9/11 that tells the truth is by a Republican architecture teacher at Claremont College who said it's a fake. It was, nobody has yet seen the report on that. You know, the report is in the basement of the Capitol. And you can go down there if you're a member of the Senate, but you can't go alone to assess what happened. Then, what's his name? Oliver Stone made a fake movie about it. But that's a phony story in order to get us into the war. And in order to create an enemy. Watch all those presidents who create an enemy. Biden's remarks today when he announced that we got to get America back to what was clean and frank and straightforward, not where Trump is taking. So they're trying to sell you that Trump is the only guy running for higher office who's interested in money. Not quite. By the way, Biden's son is a vice president of an oil company in Ukraine, which is a right-wing, pro-German country. And his assistant there is Victoria Nuland, who used to work for Hillary at the State Department. So they tell you everything, you know, to distract you, but they don't tell you what's going on. You have to be a real detective in America to determine what they're doing and what they're doing to us. Here's a guy who, when he was inaugurated, he was 78. He almost as old as Sanders. I don't believe the Sanders candidacy. I didn't believe the Kerry candidacy. You remember that convention? When Kerry comes out and says, Lieutenant John Kerry reporting for duty, remember? And really all it was a staging area for Obama. They brought him out and he said, there are no red states, there are no blue states, there's only a United States. So it really was to move Obama up to look like a symbol of freedom when it wasn't, a symbol of conformity. You can hear it. You can hear the propaganda if you watch CNN or MSNBC. MSNBC is the Fox of the left, but it's not truthful. And then they have a lesbian reading news that makes you think it's freer. And they also have Woody's son on there. Dylan Farrow, or Satchel was his real name. His given Christian name is Satchel, like the ball player. I talked to Woody this week, making a movie in Spain, which I'm sure will show up at the Sequoia. How long has it been since any of you went to a movie? You know, Lucy went over there to see the Robert Redford movie, and she called and said, what time does Redford's picture go on? The manager said, what time can you be here? So now we know where it is. What else, Kathleen? Tell me.
Mort, what do you think the true story is about 9/11?
Who?
9/11. What is the real story?
The real story was to provoke war and not to give us the insight of what's going on. And they had to protect the Saudis. And it would be nice for them to explain why. But I don't think anybody from Iraq came here and blew up that building. And the thing about the plane, one other thing you might notice, when those planes come in to the building, where's the Air Force? If you come in with a plane, an armed plane, the Air Force immediately goes up, the Air Defense Command. Where were they? When they went into the Pentagon, they went into the area where the files are and the money, and that was all burned. But you'll never be able to find any pictures of a plane going into the Pentagon. So that's a funny story. This takes you back to the genesis of the funny story. The framing of Nixon, he's up. Ford is in. Nobody voted for Ford. Ford brings in two unknown assistants, Rumsfeld and Cheney. And things begin to change. And if you look at the whole Iraq war, Cheney is the president, not the, the wild man, you know. As a boy, you know, George Bush was wild. He was getting arrested. He was drunk. He didn't show up in the National Guard to wash his plane on time. And I met him, you know. He told me he stopped drinking and stopped using drugs because he was born again. And he said, I don't need those false stimulants because I was born again. First of all, if you had a chance to be born again, why would you come back as George Bush? That's the first. Then he said to me, I met him in Texas at the governor's mansion. He said, I'm secure in the fact that when I go, I can get into the kingdom of heaven. I said, well, Jesus couldn't get me. And he said, why not? I said, we're Jewish. So he said, I never thought of that. And then he said to me, they're not making Jews the way they used to. It's sort of like, you know, Tesla quality control. They sure are. Good movie, by the way. The Passion. Mel Gibson. Really good. But Jesus would be just as safe now with the Israelis as he was then with the non-believers. Yes, Captain, carry on.
Mort, there are now 20 Democrats running in 2020. Anyone that you would endorse?
Well, how many do they have now? 35?
20.
20? Oh, only 20. Oh, what a talented party. How come they didn't do anything during the 8 years? You notice Hillary is very quiet at the moment. She thinks he blew the chance, her husband. Do you remember there were so many girls with him before the impeachment? Anyway, Hillary paid off the one girl $863,000 to back off in court. And Clinton, in an unguarded moment, said, she's what you get when you drag a $20 bill through a trailer park. So then later, I was inside a restaurant in Georgetown, and I ran into James Carville, who managed the Clinton campaign, and I said, don't you think that's a little strong? That girl is what you get when you drag a $20 bill through a trailer park? And he said, that's how he got me. Whether he was joking or not, I don't know. I was so, surprised there. Well, yes, carry on.
And that was overpaid.
The Democrats are washing in great candidates. No wonder he's not worried. Trump doesn't look worried, does he? Or is he always like that? It's a perfect example of how a guy's influenced by his father. Most of you don't reflect on this, but you're products of what happened to your father. Either you see what happens to your father and ignites you, or it depresses you. And you subsequently alter your own approach to life. When I worked in Atlantic City, I worked at Resorts International, owned by Merv Griffin at the time. And Trump was next door, Trump Plaza, and the marquee fell off one night, or it jumped. We don't know. We're still trying to figure it out. Well, he can't be any more than a symptom. I mean, they don't have that big a place in history. But they don't want to tell us the truth. I mean, look at those shows on Sunday. Meet the Press. And this week with George Stephanopoulos, they got a guy who was Clinton's campaign manager to give you an unvarnished view of the news. ABC. That's all they could find. You really wonder, what happened. Think back to Walter Cronkite, Edward R. Murrow, Huntley and Brinkley, and think of Chuck Todd, or the worst of it, Rachel Maddow. The only guy they had that was cooking at MSNBC was Keith Olbermann. Yeah. And they framed him out of there. They got rid of him fast. And he was the only one to produce the audience. And she was like the ghost. She was next door. When I was on there with an old woman, she told me that she used to sleep there with her makeup on for any day that he failed to show up. Then one day they got into it and they fired him. And I worked with the news guys a lot, you know. I was at the Carter Convention, and I worked on the Today Show. I was the one that broke the story that Eagleton would be the running mate. Not that Eagleton was always a little behind. You remember him? Like Gene McCarthy said that if Eagleton had the assignment Paul Revere had, he'd be riding through Boston now saying, "The British are coming, the British are coming." And that pretty well. But nobody like McCarthy now either, who could rally all those kids and stop Vietnam. He went into the New Hampshire primary and beat Johnson. And that was the beginning of the end. Remember Johnson with those dogs with the big ears? He used to hold the dog up and he used to hold Johnson up by his ears. He'd been a fine comeuppance.
Mort, you mentioned the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
After the rift with Johnny Carson, what did his producer, Peter Lasalle, I don't know how to pronounce it, his producer, Peter Lasalle, what did he say or do about it?
They just all shook in their boots to try and stay straight with him. And he was a real loner. You know, he used to drive out to Malibu in a Mercedes 350 SL and play the drums and watch the waves come in. Married 4 times. Finally hit gold. He hit a great girl at the end. But he wanted to punish me because I booked Garrison on the show, and Garrison was a big hit. And which proves again, if you're forgotten, and it's possible you have, that if you tell the American people the truth, it works. It always works. Sometimes they slow you down, but it always works. Your talent will never desert you if you don't desert your talent. Some guys went on there with nothing but their curiosity. Jack Parr had the biggest show on NBC. I know nothing there. I did his show many times with Jonathan Winter. He didn't have a script or anything written on an envelope. He was just honest. Got Betty Davis and Judy Garland. Parr, you know, his wife owned the American Tobacco Company, her father. So he retired, went to Greenwich, Connecticut. And every Saturday they'd go on the Broadway and see a matinee and an evening show. Then they'd eat sardines. And if he saw an actor, he was like a fan. Or he said, "This guy's great, I gotta go tell him I think he's great." She said, "Please don't." And he walked over and this guy's eating and he said to him, "Mr. Pacino, you're my favorite movie star." And the guy said, "I'm Robert De Niro." That's a true story. Great guy, great to me, great to Jonathan Winters. We never got any laughs. He said, "I'm going to keep putting you on till the audience gets the idea." I said, "What idea?" He said, "That they're supposed to laugh." Didn't get it right away. Jonathan is about the best I've ever worked with. He really knocked me out. And when we were at NBC, you know, they assigned Woody Allen to write a pilot for Winters and me. That time Woody was working with Sid Caesar, the junior writer on your shows since it was rich. That's when television was really alive, you know. And it isn't now, no matter what you do. That picture with Christian Bale, you know, it's got a lot of prejudice against Cheney, but it isn't really good movie making. It isn't arresting. You know, holding you the way those movies with Jimmy Stewart did. When you go back and you see, you know, a pot boiler like the Glenn Miller story, and Stewart pulled you right into it. You believe him. You believe him in anything. He's like the last American. That's why Mr. Smith is so good. And it's a wonderful life. Straight line movie making with a degree of optimism you can't find in the country anymore. For instance, in The Cincinnati Kid, Steve McQueen is playing poker with these guys, and he goes to a pub, and a guy follows him into the men's room, and he says, "I'm saying you mark those cards." And McQueen said, "I don't need marked cards to beat you, pal." And he breaks the window and jumps in the alley and leaves. Good movie. Written by a blacklisted guy. And a guy who probably couldn't get a job now. If you tell the truth, the pictures last forever. You know, there's a movie called His Kind of Woman with Sophia Loren. And she's on Fifth Avenue. She's being kept by this guy who's married and rich. And her girlfriend comes over and looks at the apartment. G gives you everything. And Sophia says, except any part of himself. That's really wonderful writing. It's stark and it's in front of you. There's a movie called In a Lonely Place with Bogey and Gloria Graham. And he's got a temper that can't be controlled. People turn his script down and he punches them and he can't work in the studio. The girl finally leaves. Gloria Graham. And you hear his voiceover as he's typing. He says, "I was born when I met you. I lived for a while when you loved me. I died when you left me." The end. So those guys they were really honest. By the way, if you're horsing around with YouTube, they just posted the Academy Awards show. I was one of the MCs on in 1960. You might get a kick out of it. I'm sure you will. And during that show, you know, I met Sophia Loren, and I met her husband, Carlo Ponti. So later on, Sean Connery, whom I also used to know, Connery went into Carlo Ponti's office and a picture of the Pope and the Pope before him. And he said, "Did you know both this guy?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What were they like?" And Ponti looked at the picture and said, "This one believed in God." So I told last week, I told that story about Connery. We did the night show with Carson, you know. And there was an actress on the show. She had a scratch across her chest. She said, "We made a picture in the jungle." and a snake bit me. And Connery said, I'd be happy to help you get the poison out. So these are very colorful people. They're not afraid of their job. Connery's terrific. The man who would be king, John Huston. Really heavy-duty guy. Lucy was going to book Shirley Bassey one time, who sings the theme to Goldfinger with Connery. A great entertainer. Was in love with Peter Finch, the great actor. Conviction. It comes from conviction. The comedians don't understand that. Why? Because they don't have any. They don't get, just like it sent a guy off a carrier. They're not sent into the world with any conviction. Anything they'd be willing to die for. You're going to die anyway, so might as well be for a good cause.
Mort?
Yeah.
There's a question asking, who were some of the strong women in movies, like Lily Palmer in Body and Soul?
What was she in?
Body and Soul?
Oh, I did laugh in with her. And the producer said to me, you want to take a chance? I said, sure. He said, you'll be the president. We'll bring the cast on. They'll ask you questions in a press conference. No script. And she wouldn't do it. She said to the producer, George Slaughter, he's anti-feminist, and I refuse to work with him. I think that's a cop-out. I'm not anti-feminist. In fact, the majority of my estate went to all these girls I was married to. So, the first time I proposed to a girl was an actress. And I went over and gave her this engagement ring, this emerald. And she said, I have to shoot at 7 in the morning. I'm going to have lines in my eyes. I can't talk about this now. And I told my writer friend this, and he said, young man, God is trying to tell you something. That's not the girl. It was true. But I wasn't ready to hear it. Why? Because I'm a romantic. Why am I a romantic? Because that's what my mother told me. My mother believed in straight optimism. And in the face of poverty, which I don't know if anybody in Mill Valley has faced. We got our standards here. I mean, we let Subway in a block away, and
Are there any questions in the room?
I have one.
Yes. Please keep it short then.
The money order for the Oswald rifle in the National Archives was never cashed. There's not a bank there's not a bank stamp on it at all. It's just there.
The money order
The
for
money order for the Oswald rifle in the JFK case.
what's the question?
the money order for the Oswald rifle, the rifle that was used by Oswald, was never cashed. But what is the question?
There's not a bank statement.
Well, first they said it was a Mannlicher Carcano.
So it was
And they also said during the investigation, I guess this fellow asked the question, knows I work for Garrison. They They said that he was a great shot. So we went back in the files of the Marine Corps when he was in boot camp. And he doesn't turn out to be such a great shot. It's a lie. Oswald, when we got him, Garris was off. There were no cell phones then. He had the unlisted phone number of the head of the FBI in Dallas in his wallet. And in case you didn't notice him, he went around New Orleans. First he had a rally handing out pictures of Castro, what a wonderful guy he is. Then he went to buy a Ford and said, you don't have any credit. He said, well, I was in Russia, I could get a Ford. Then he goes to another street corner and hands out pictures of Castro, admiring pictures of Castro. The FBI, we later found out, had an intimate, ongoing relationship with Marina Oswald, including the dates of her menstrual periods. The FBI. When Jack Ruby shot him, you recall, he shoots him while he's being guarded by 26 members of the Dallas police, or 27 if you count Ruby. And then Ruby says to Earl Warren and Ford, can you get me to Washington so I can tell you the truth? And the Chief Justice says, I don't have that kind of power. The Chief Justice. So, Warren, of course, you recall how he became the Chief Justice? Eisenhower got his favorite son votes at the Republican convention. And they promised him that job. And it did pay off. Because William Lloyd Douglas kept cracking up about schools that divvy up the student body according to color. And he integrated the schools. Douglas got him at lunch and started banging on him. But it's not just what they did, it's how uncurious people are about it. You know, I knew the president pretty well, and it's interesting about fate. The old man made all his money because he imported all the gin in the country from England, the majority of his money. His first son, Joe, was shot down by the Germans. He was in the Navy over the Channel. Second son assassinated as president. Third son, Robbie, assassinated, and the LA police are very shy of detail on the case. And then John Jr. in the plane crash, Teddy cremates the kids, so there's no autopsy. And then Teddy, you remember, had brain cancer, and he had an operation at Duke. But the last picture of him is with a full head of hair, so they didn't operate through the hair. It's all stuff people don't even ask anymore. Some are not curious, and some are afraid there's an answer they won't be able to process. That's the worst crime I know of, the killing of the president. And I was lucky enough to know him. The old man is another story in a fashion. You know? He thought Hitler was going to win. And he was a little sorry that he didn't. I did an hour special on the BBC in England in 1960. The audience booed him, that's the old man. And he said Hitler would win the war.
Mort?
Yeah.
At what age did you start reading newspapers, and which ones did you read?
Well, I used to read the LA Times. and the Chronicle, and the New York Times. And today, that was your buddy when you were having ham and eggs. But I wouldn't trust anybody in the press now. Read the New York Times now and what they're trying to say. It's an openly propagandistic newspaper. So is the Washington Post, which is owned by Bezos. And Bezos took out a divorce, Kathleen.
Yes.
$195 billion. He gave her $5. She is not a lawyer, right? Maybe you can get a lawyer from Amazon. I did that a lot. I was my best friend. Sit in a coffee shop and read the paper. Today, of course, nobody does that. Everybody's on the phone. I don't know if the phone brought us closer together or not. The jury is still out on that. But, Lucy was talking to me on the way in about the show last night, the comedy show. Do you notice when there are girls on the show, they deprecate themselves? I can't get a date, I can't get anywhere with a guy. It's all about how they're wrong. Theoretically, the feminist position is that we're wrong. And I think it's closer to the truth. I remember when Robin was around, we'd go into the green room with the comedians. They all want to meet him and make notes and everything. Very generous guy, he'd never tell anybody they're terrible, which actually is a heroic act to start saving their lives. He and I were out here in the parking lot. Lucy had a New Year's Eve show. And that's when Romney was running for president. And you remember that convention? Clinton comes up. He says, so here comes Obama. And everybody was excited, and Oprah cried. And Clinton said, I cried. Everybody laughed a lot. And then I mentioned that Romney looks like everybody's first husband. And they came off the stage, but Robin was at the steps. And he said, did you just think of that now? And I said, you got to do it before you get scared of doing it. You got to get discharged, the venom. And then he and I were in a parking lot. And a guy walks by, obviously homeless. And he started going to Lucy's dumpster, looking for stuff. And he looked over at Robin and me and he said, big time comedians, Lenny Bruce could kick your ass. It's a personal hero. I knew Lenny pretty well, And I was the technical advisor on that movie Dustin Hoffman made him on, which is not true at all. He's a very nice guy and all that stuff about looking like a priest. And he never gave up. I was in court with him, the judge said, what's your name? He said, Lenny Bruce. He said, is that your given name? You're under oath. So he said, no. What's your real name? He said, Leonard Alfred Schneider. And the judge said, are you ashamed of being Jewish? And Lenny said, yeah. Which brought the house down. And he thought the worst offense in show business was Jerry Lewis. Lenny thought that thing with the kids and the money. I did the Jerry Lewis show, on ABC, remember with Kay Stevens and Dee Cabot was the head writer, and who else? Jack Jones. And one of the writers said, Mort Sahl got famous reading newspapers, and Jerry Lewis got famous by building around this people who deliver newspapers. Cabot wrote that into the show. So Cabot worked for Mort, too, writer, and for Johnny Carson. Most of that stuff was safe in the monologues. Jay Leno or Letterman. Safe stuff out of the comedy store. There hasn't been a dangerous comedian in a long time. Imagine what's happening to America does not inspire them in some way. Even a protest. Any other questions like that?
Yes, Mort. Do you have a favorite adventure movie?
Adventure?
Yes. Adventure movie.
Yeah. The one where Stewart makes a smaller version of a plane with the German sign to take off. But again, it's wanting Jimmy Stewart to live. He looks like a guy you could trust. You might like this story. I hope so. When George Bush ran for re-election, the old man, Jerry Weintraub, who produced the Liberace movie, gave a big party for him. I entertained. And I went in the other room, and Jimmy Stewart was there with his wife, and he said, I've got to go home, I really don't feel good. He looked kind of gray, and Gloria said to him, no, Jim, it's bad form to die in somebody else's house. And he looked at me, Stewart, and he said, it also could be considered overacting. Well, always like him. He was a Republican. And let you know it, walked his dog every night at 10 after 6 on Lexington Drive, right next to Rosemary Clooney, who was married to Ferrer then. A very bright guy, Ferrer. He could write the second. I mean, he was really. And his son's a great actor, Miguel Ferrer. You don't see him much. He's really good. Most of the no talent is in the comedians. Actors are passable at certain times,
Mort, how about Gregory Peck in Marooned? Gregory Peck in Marooned.
Yes.
Did you like that film?
Yeah, I think there's some very subtle touches. And you remember when it opens? There's the mother duck and the little ones behind her, and they pull back, and you're at the Cape. They're getting ready to go. And remember when David Jansen says to Peck, those are my buddies up there in the Strand. We're doing everything we can. Well, that's not good enough. And Peck says to him, there's no room in the program for a chief astronaut that doesn't understand maximum effort. And he said, if you don't do anything to get them, then screw you and screw the program. He said, there isn't time to stage a recovery vehicle. How can you do it? And then they cut with a helicopter shot to the Cape. And Peck is there in a trench coat and a hard hat. And they've got the staging area blueprints. And he initialed it. He said, that's how you do it. And they sent him on. It's a wonderful picture. But Peck's authority, the fact that he won't buy into the madness, remember when he's driving down the highway to rescue those men, the Texas Highway Patrol stops him and they say, you may know how to get to the moon and back, mister, but you're a menace on the highway. Good. I never saw Gregory Peck and I didn't believe him. There's a dignity there, It's very paternal. That's why Mockingbird is such a good movie. You can do a lot in a few lines in a movie. For instance, there's a picture with Duvall where he plays a narc. And the Mexican drug distributor says to him, if you can just give us a phone call when the cops are going to raid us. And he makes him a big offer. He says, no. And the narc says, the guy says to Duvall, you're still a cop. He said, until they kill me. Duvall has terrific authority. Not a liberal, very hard right. But you believe him. You believe him in everything. Godfather, everything. There's something, there's something about actors, I saw The Towering Inferno last night. And Steve McQueen is great in it. Because he's totally believable. He says to the architect, you know we can't control anything over 9 stories, but you keep making them bigger and bigger. William Holden, who was a great God person. So was Steve. But you'll believe him. That's all it's all about, is whether they can pass that test to the screen. I looked at all that new stuff on Comcast. I've got all that. But a lot of it you don't care about. The subject matter in it. You do care whether Jimmy Stewart gets to keep his bank, though. Whether Glenn Miller gets to have his orchestra. Gene Arthur, Mr. Spence. Good stuff. Most of that stuff was written by communists who were later blacklisted. And the first political joke I ever had luck with in the Hungry Act was that every time the Russians throw an American in jail, we throw an American in jail. For sure they can't get away with it. That's the first joke. It hit me. I had a long silences when I started. So I learned the hard way. But that's the only way to learn. Be a grown-up. Stay with it. Stay optimistic. And give the audience a way in. That Academy Award show, when you look at it on YouTube, Jerry Lewis was the MC. He ran an hour too short. And we're all out there, there's an hour to go yet. So he said, everybody dance. I'm standing next to Sid Charisse, and I stepped on her foot. Not intentionally.
Mort, we have one last question.
Yeah.
Did you become a screenwriter because of your friendship with Clint Eastwood?
Yes. I went to him when I was at Warner Brothers, and I said, I've written this picture, and I wonder if you'd direct me in it. And he read it and called me and saw me, and he said, I'd like to do it. He said, you write it, and I'll do it, we'll direct it together. I'll direct the outside, and you can direct the interiors. And once I had him as a sale, I didn't have any trouble selling scripts after that. And the scripts are just as realistic as I am. They're all full of girls that are crazy until they love somebody and they're rescued. I kept writing them when I was married to them. And I sold 3 pictures to TriStar at one lunch. The head of the studio said to me, make my heart beat faster. Everybody has a dream of love. They're too embarrassed, so they say they're dreaming about money. But they dream about being loved. And wonder what it's like. You know? By the way, if you're a Lenny Bruce admirer, I bet a lot of you are, he liked phone sex. So he was drawn to. It's a way of being involved, but not being involved. And Jerry Lewis kept threatening to kill him because you made fun of the telephone. Lewis said, I've got the gun here on my pillow, I sleep with it. And an Army 45. And I told you, Jerry Lewis was coming to the theater when he was around. You know. He was going to do love letters here. Who else is in with him? Nobody. Just him. And Dean Martin, when he left him, said, I feel like I got off Folsom and somebody gave me $10 a new suit. And they made more money than anybody. But it's a hard diet. Salt, crackers, and no water. I hope I answered some of your questions, man. And
You did.
how's our friend?